In this video, I'm going to show you how to place the front lower control arm on this Honda Accord. Attaches the bottom of your knuckle to your front subframe. You do need an alignment after we replace this part, so keep that in mind. Let's get started. Use a 19mm socket, remove all 5 lug nuts, and then remove the wheel. Let's remove the axle nut. You're going to need a 36mm socket. The axle nut on these vehicles is squished in right here. We're going to use a punch or a chisel and a hammer and open it up a little bit. Just like that. That'll make it a whole lot easier to remove it. Basically unlocks the axle nut. Now use a 36mm socket and remove the axle nut. Now if you don't have an impact that'll do this, what you can do is use a breaker bar, put a pry bar between the lug studs, and that will prevent the wheel from spinning as you try to break this free. Use a punch and a hammer, tap it in. There we go. If needed, spray some rust penetrant in there, but you want to make sure this breaks free from the hub. Use a 12mm socket and remove this bolt that holds the bracket for the brake hose onto the knuckle. Sometimes these get stuck in there, so if needed, work it back and forth so you don't break the bolt. Remove the bracket. Let's remove this 10mm mounting nut that holds the bracket for the ABS wire. Now you may not necessarily have to remove this, but I like to give it extra slack when the knuckle is forward. Take that out, and there we go. Let's remove the cotter pin holding on the castle nut for the lower ball joint. Straighten this out. Push this through. Hopefully yours isn't stuck on there. A lot of times they seize up. If that's the case, you can just cut it and hammer a socket right over it. Take this out. Discard it. You don't want to reuse these. Use a 19mm socket and remove this mounting nut. Stick it back on a few threads. That way when we separate this, things don't separate too much. Now what you can do is apply pressure to this stud. The upper control arm and the knuckle is naturally going to want to pull up or at least stay where it is. This is going to naturally stay where it is or press down. So basically they want to separate. I'm going to use a pull jack. If you're on the ground, you can use a floor jack to apply some upwards pressure to the knuckle. You can either press directly up on this stud, but if you have the rotor screws that hold it flush onto the hub, you can also use anything to apply a little bit of upwards pressure on the rotor because it's, well, secured safely onto the hub. Now take a hammer, tap right here. That should separate these two. There we go. That's all it took. Take this out. Remove your support. Push this up. Make sure the axle pokes through. Pull the knuckle aside. Now that the knuckle's pulled out of the way, in order for it to not swing as I'm working, I'm just going to use a ratchet strap. You can use a bungee cord and just tie it over here, either underneath the vehicle. In my case, I'm going to go on the lift arm because I'm on a lift. I just don't want it moving while I'm working. Let's remove the lower bolt off of the strut fork. This is a 17mm headed bolt with a 17mm headed mounting nut. Remove this. Spin this. It's great that it spins because actually most of the time these seize inside that bushing. Now what I'm going to do now is just take a hammer and drive it through. Mine is stuck, so I'm going to use a punch. Take that out. This is still in good condition. If it's completely rotted, you're going to want to replace it. I'm just going to clean up the rust that's still here. Use a 5mm Allen and tap it in the center. You can use that to hold or spin the stud while you either hold or spin the nut, depending on which one you want to spin. And then just put a 17mm wrench over, right on that mounting nut. There we go. There we go. And now we can remove the link from the control arm. Let's remove the rearward 17mm headed bolt that holds this control arm onto the subframe. If you can fit a power tool in there, go right ahead. All I can fit is a ratchet. So I'm going to break it free. Shouldn't be very tight, and remove it. There's the bolt. At the front, right here below this hockey puck bushing, you'll see a 19mm headed bolt. Remove this. Now use a pry bar and pull the control arm out of the subframe. Careful of what you pry on. You don't want to damage anything. There it is. Take the new control arm and slide it in. Now what I'm going to do is bring it down and underneath the strut fork. Try to line it up with the rear. If you need to tap this in, I recommend using a rubber mallet so you don't cause damage to the control arm. Put the bolt in on the front. Finish tightening this one up. At this point we can torque this one. 65 foot-pounds is the torque for this bolt. Slide in the rear bolt. This one is important that it gets torqued at right height since the bushing pivots up and down. So I'm going to get it close. And then we're going to have to put some upwards pressure on this control arm so we can finalize the tightening of it. There we go, right there. Make sure you have a bolt ready. Tap it through. Install the mounting nut. Lift this up close to ride height. If you can't get it spot on, that's fine. If you're on the ground, it's easiest if you just use a floor jack and go up. I'm on a lift, so I'm using a pull jack, and I'm going to lift the control arm up to approximately level with the ground. And then we can torque the lower strut bushing as well as the rearward control arm bushing on the subframe. Finish snugging it up. Torque this bolt to 47 foot-pounds. That's it right there. If while you're torquing it, your bolt starts spinning, hold it with a wrench so you can get an accurate torque spec. The torque for this bolt is 47 foot-pounds. That's it right there. Now you can lower your support. Now reinstall the sway bar link into the control arm. Put on the mounting nut, and with this on, because I already have the strut in, unless you have an Allen key or a socket that'll fit here, I don't, but you can use that. I'm going to use some locking pliers. On the back side of the sway bar link there's a small metal sleeve here. That's what we're going to clamp onto. Just enough to hold the stud in place, and then use that 17mm socket or wrench that you were using to tighten this up. Okay, snug it. I have to hold this with my pliers since the stud is spinning 28 foot-pounds. Perfect. I like to put a little bit of grease on the splines of the axle. This prevents it from being stuck in the hub in the future. You don't need a lot. Try to avoid getting it on the threads, but once again, this will make it so that next time you need to pull the axle, you don't have to struggle, you just push it through. Now take the axle, put it through the hub, lift up the knuckle, make sure that axle goes through, and there we go. As soon as the axle goes through, you can seat this. Install the lower ball joint nut. Once you thread it on, snug it up. 65 foot-pounds is the torque for this nut. As you could tell, the entire stud was spinning as I was trying to torque it. So what I'm going to do is apply a little bit of upwards pressure on this lower control arm. This is going to press the control arm into the stud and therefore hopefully clamp it on tighter in here so we can now spin this mounting nut without the stud spinning. So let's try this again. 65 foot-pounds. So the slot for the cotter pin needs to line up, and to do that you want to keep tightening to the nearest slot instead of loosening. You never want to loosen on these. Now I'm very close to being lined up, but it's not spot on, so I have to keep going. Once you have it lined up, install your cotter pin and bend it over to lock it in. Remove your support if you used it. When installing the axle nut, it is recommended that you put a little bit of either engine oil or grease right on the mating surface of the mounting nut where it touches on the hub. And that is to avoid the friction so you can correctly torque it. Bottom it out. The torque for this is 242 foot-pounds, so it is pretty tight. Now that it's close, let's torque it. I have a pry bar through my lug studs holding the rotor from spinning, and the whole hub really. And once again, 242 foot-pounds of torque is required for this axle nut. All right. And that's it right there. To lock this in, you want to stake it back down. That's plenty. Let's reconnect this bracket holding on the brake hose. Use that 12mm headed bolt to snug it up. Don't make it too tight, just snug it so it can hold the bracket on the knuckle. Reinstall this bracket for the ABS wire and the bolt holding it on. This is very small, so when you tighten it, make sure you don't over tighten it, just snug it up. Let's get the wheel on. Start on all 5 lug nuts in a cross pattern, bottom them out, and also in a cross pattern, torque them to 79 foot-pounds. .79 foot-pounds in a cross pattern. Here we go. Double check them all. Now take it for a road test and don't forget to get an alignment.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.